Mike. Toronto. VK on the beat. Check. I'm in Toronto where you wanna get the city love. I'm from Toronto where you wanna get the city love. I'm in Toronto like we wanna get the city love. My city love me back for my city love.
Welcome to episode 1440 of Toronto Mic'd. Proudly brought to you by Great Lakes Brewery, a fiercely independent craft brewery who believes in supporting communities, good times, and brewing amazing beer. Order online for free local home delivery in the GTA. Palma Pasta. Enjoy the taste of fresh, homemade Italian pasta and entrees from Palma Pasta in Mississauga and Oakville. RecycleMyElectronics.ca. Committing to our planet's future means properly recycling our electronics of the past. The Advantaged Investor Podcast from Raymond James Canada. Valuable perspective for Canadian investors who want to remain knowledgeable, informed, and focused on long-term success. And Ridley Funeral Home. Pillars of the community since 1921. Today, making his highly anticipated Toronto Mike debut is Bob Stellick. Welcome, Bob.
Thank you very much. I feel very privileged. 1440 here is the number of the podcast. Not many. How many professional athletes don't get to 1440 and don't get in the Hall of Fame? I think this might be a Hall of Fame podcast.
I'm banking on it, Bob. I'm banking on it. Now, so many people, I say, Bob Stellick's coming over, and multiple people refer to you, including Midtown Gord, Brother Bob. Brother Bob. Is this like your nickname is Brother Bob? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, it's okay to that. Gord and I went to high school together, of course, George Vanney in North York, and people there called us after my father's name. Our father had a TV and appliance repair shop called Ernie's TV, so we were Big Ernie and Little Ernie in high school. So now I've gone from that to Brother Bob and Brother Gord. I think Carol Huntley, one of the usherettes of the Gardens, I think tagged us with that a long time ago. So that we've kind of adopted it. I think Pat Burns was one guy that sort of he popularized it. He took it from the usherette level to the head coaching level.
Pat Burns, love it. I had Brian Good over here talking about Pat Burns sitting in with the Good brothers.
Wow, yeah, he talked really fondly about those guys, and Pat Burns was certainly a incredibly unique character, probably outside of hiring Cliff Fletcher, the biggest game-changing moment in my Maple Leaf Gardens history, and maybe the history for a lot of Leaf fans. And that time that Cliff pulled that rabbit out of the hat, I still am stunned that we got Pat, and he certainly lived up to his billing, and it was a tremendous run under his leadership for sure.
But Pat Burns, like a law and order guy, right? He was a cop.
Yeah, he's a cop from Gatineau. I think he was a cop up there.
Where I'm going with that is that Good Brothers, like I had Brian Good here. They had a lot of songs about hash and smoking weed, like they before it was legal. So it's just interesting to hear that Pat Burns was a big Good Brothers fan.
Yeah, I think maybe Pat got out of policing before policing got out of Pat, because most of his stories were mostly vigilante police stories. They weren't stories that. They were kind of like, we didn't think this guy was a good guy, so I think we settled him before he got to court or whatever it was. But yeah, definitely a checkered and interesting and well-lived life.
It really sucks as I talk to you, because you went to the washroom before we started recording, and you saw the Ty Domi picture that he signed for me in 2002, and I mentioned that was right after Pat Quinn got back from winning gold in Salt Lake City. So then we had a moment where I was thinking of Pat Quinn, and now I've had a moment where I'm thinking of Pat Burns, and I'm realizing how much it sucks, Bob, that they're both gone. Shout out to Ridley Funeral Home. They're both gone far too soon.
Yeah, the two mega Pats for sure, and guys that seemed just beyond full of life. I mean, Pat Quinn, I still work with Hockey Hall of Fame, is one of my best clients. I do the PR for them and in and around the induction work and that. And one of my favorite times every year is we get on the call with the Hockey Hall of Fame committee to call the new inductees. And Bill Hay did a tremendous job at it, but Pat Quinn, when he took over, took it sort of to a whole different level. Like Pat Quinn brings this level of gravitas. And I always remember one of great Pat Quinn lines was, I can't remember who it was, or it'll go name us, but an official was getting in the Hall of Fame, and we're So Pat, we do he's talking to media and Pat's on mute, and Pat asked me again, am I on mute? Yeah. And I said, yes, you are, Pat. And he goes, referees shouldn't be in the Hockey Hall of Fame. That was his life with officials. And it'd be interesting to see in the future of the NHL with the more anonymous four official system, if anybody ever gets in again.
Well, the whole idea is a ref does a good job if you don't notice them.
Completely. And I think that was Pat's point. But again, back in that era, you watched a game or you approached a game and you knew that it would be officiated differently based on whomever the official was. And sometimes, so maybe I think it's a much better thing. I give Gary Bettman credit. A lot of people don't give Gary Bettman a lot of credit for anything, but I believe he was the one that was really pushed for the fourth official based on all the problems they had in the NBA and what the extra official solved.
So Brother Bill is a different guy, okay? That's Neil Morrison. He was on CFNY forever. He comes on the show all the time. But Brother Bob, which I'm just going to call you Bob, but we just need to let people know who aren't aware. Like, I can't imagine there's many listeners right now who know Bob Stellick is not, like, that they don't know that Bob Stellick is Gord Stellick's brother. But, like, just to establish the fact, are you the younger brother or older brother of Gord Stellick?
Yes, I'm the younger, taller, better looking brother of Gord Stellick. Yeah. So, I mean, our background is that Gord had a really interesting stat, like in the bizarre stats of Maple Leaf Gardens world, was the only person that Harold Ballard hired in the last decade of his life was me and Gord.
Wow.
And it's because before that it was Punch Imlach, and that turned into a disaster. And Mr. Ballard, people didn't turn over at the Gardens. Jerry McNamara came in.
They had to die, right?
They had to die. That's how I got my job. Stan Bodiak died, and I got his job. That's right. And Harold Ballard called me, and Gord's line was, Harold Ballard, he went to UCC. He was a connected guy in Toronto. He knew everybody, and yet he picked the TV repairman's two kids as his go-tos. And I remember years later, Harold Jr. said to me once that the reason I got the job was I looked like him. And I don't think Harold thought that fondly about his kids, but I mean, I remember the one story was that Harold Jr. wanted Stan Bodiak's PR job, and Harold Ballard filled it more quickly with a Stellick. So I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
Well, and it's worth noting, a fun fact is that when you were taking over for Stan Bodiak, because he died, shout out to Ridley Funeral Home, that you were offered more money than your brother, right?
Yeah, it's that classic. I mean, in all walks of life, people are valued more outside than they are inside the organization.
Right.
And the story that I got from the old timers around, like not old timers, that's terrible to say, but the experienced veterans from the Gardens was Mr. Ballard was incredibly cheap, right? That was his public perception.
Right.
But yet, when he was the vice president of marketing, he was a big spender. He was a pal Hal, everyone's best friend type of idea. And when he took over, again, wildly underfinanced, most of it, he joked that the building was owned by TD. WHA comes in, but he emulated Conn Smythe. That's the old-time boss. And Conn Smythe was a miserable guy by all accounts. So Harold Ballard, the new persona was, I'm going to be Harold Ballard, kind of like a new model of Conn Smythe. So he reimagined himself along those lines. And the story of me getting hired is very much, I worked for Jim Gregory at the National Hockey League. I got a call from Mr. Ballard. The draft was in Toronto. Again, Mr. Ballard, being the prick that he was at the time, told the NHL they wouldn't let him have the draft at the Gardens, so they had to have it at the convention center.
Right.
The Gardens had no air conditioning, so it would have been a hot day anyway, but that was Harold.
Then they could just charge extra for the drinks.
Yeah, that's a made up story too, but
is it?
With a Beatles story?
Well, yeah, the Beatles story. Is that
all
fiction?
Made up. Yeah.
Okay, you're here to dispel the myth, because I've always heard that. Yeah.
Yeah. So the Beatles story will segue back to the other part.
Yeah,
but the Beatles story was that the true part, I believe, is that Beatles, apparently, their set was 37 minutes long.
Right.
So people lined up in front of the Gardens. They had to board up all the shops on the whole street to buy tickets. And then Harold Ballard, in his own way, thought, why wouldn't we do two shows that day? The Beatles are, they're not, we can clean the building out. And apparently he neglected to tell Brian Epstein that he was doing that. So Brian Epstein, I guess, showed up, had a tantrum, and then Harold Ballard pulled the check out and said, you tell the people they can't come. And by the way, here's your check for X number of dollars for a second show. So but the story was that he turned off the water fountains at Maple Leaf Garden and only sold large drinks. So anyone who's ever been to Maple Leaf Gardens knows there are no water fountains in Maple Leaf Gardens.
That's right.
And the drinks back in that era were one size with one ice cube in them and a piece of saran wrap on top. That was pretty unsophisticated for sure. So that was.
So look, already I'm glad it took a long time. I don't know why it took 40 episodes.
There's 1,439 better people.
And I don't know. That's you saying that, not me. But Gord, for example, your brother Gord's been over several times, like often with Damien Cox, but on his own, he's been over as well. So I feel like this was a long time coming, and I'm glad you're here. So before we get back to, you showing up at Maple Leaf Gardens, your title, Director of Business Operations and Communications and the Director of Public Relations for the Toronto Maple Leafs, like we got a lot of ground to cover. But I need to ask you about cycling the beaches of Normandy. Did you do this?
Yes, absolutely. That was my wife and I, as our kids have grown up, in order to keep connected, we ski, cycle, and my wife likes to scuba dive, so I do that underwater fish washing with her on occasion. But so we do cycle tourism. So yeah, we did that 2 summers ago, and I highly recommend it for anyone who does it. It's not really expensive. You just get your luggage moved day to day, and you just you cycle. You take the train out from Paris to Bayeux, and you start your way.
But it sounds amazing to me. So like how many clicks a day would you do?
You do about 60 kilometers a day, 60 to 70, depending on how the day was. And then you rent the bikes are rented. And it's a very civilized way to see, rather than bombing around in a car or a tour bus.
Yeah, no pun intended. When you're at Normandy, the beaches of Normandy, you're bombing around.
Right. Well, and the beach is actually, to me, the first it's that classic example. The first beach we got to was the British beach, which nobody goes to, Sword. And we were there on our bikes. There's a group of 6 of us, and the pillboxes looked perfect from World War II. They had some guns there, and you went, wow, this is the worst one. It's going to be really awesome. But most of the other ones were a bit more commercialized. I mean, the Canadian is quite well done, and the American one's spectacular. But again, they're really busy and much different too.
By the way, Michael Traco says, great guest. Can't wait to listen to Bob Stellick on Toronto Mic'd.
Yeah. The days of wine and roses and taking care of the Toronto media were certainly fun and games at times.
Well, we're going to get into it. So, Michael, he's an FOTM. You're now an FOTM, Bob. So now I've collected 2 Stellicks here. Where do I want to go from here? I want to just give you a couple of gifts because you made the trek, and then I'm going to just listen to your great stories here. But what will I give you? Do you enjoy Italian food?
I absolutely do.
Okay, you're taking home with you a large lasagna from Palma Pasta.
Well, thank you very, very much. That's a bonus for making the trek to South Etobicoke.
Did you know you were getting that?
No, I did not.
That's a surprise for you. Okay, so it's delicious, first of all, and you'll thank me later. And I got to thank Palma Pasta right now because they sent that over and said, it's in my freezer upstairs. You'll take it before you leave. And they said, get this to Bob Stellick. So thank you, Palma Pasta, delicious Italian food in Mississauga and Oakville.
Yeah, I'm actually a huge fan of Palma Pasta. There's one on Erin Mills Parkway, not that far from where I live. And Mondays is lasagna day at Palma Pasta. $20 for a lasagna.
You know your stuff,
I know my Palma Pasta.
Yeah, you're getting a free one here today. And I will tell the listenership and you, Bob, know that TMLX 15 is going to take place at Great Lakes Brewery in Southern Etobicoke here. And your first beer is on the house. It's delicious, fresh craft beer from Great Lakes. You're taking home some beer with you, Bob.
First.
But that's an IPA that I just love. And Palma Pasta will feed everybody who shows up for free. We'll feed everyone who comes out to TMLX 15. And it's on June 27, 2024. At 6 p.m., so 6 to 9 p.m. So, Bob, bring the whole family, man.
June 27th, what day of the week is that?
Thursday.
That's a good pasta beer night.
It's like Friday Junior, okay? They're like, Mike, we're too busy on Friday. Do it Thursday. So it is June 27. Everybody is invited. And quickly, just because I have one more gift there's a measuring tape for you, Bob, from Ridley Funeral Home, Pillars of this Community. In fact, at 5 o'clock today, you'll be gone, but Brad Jones from Ridley Funeral Home will drop by and we'll record a new episode of his podcast, Life's Undertaking. So measure what you wish.
But I'm bummed. That's a pun.
Listen, he's a clever title writer here. So Gord gets into MLG first. Like, is there any chance that you were called when Stan Bodiak died because Gord put a good word for you with Harold Ballard and said, "My brother can do this"?
No, it was very strange because I was working for Gord and I both worked part-time at the Gardens. We worked part-time for Jim Gregory at NHL Central Scouting. Gord got hired full-time by Punch Imlach. I was going to school, just finished. I was working, I worked at Dow Chemical for a little while. Then Jim hired me, and I was scouting and running the office, basically, for Jim, and learning the hockey business. So that I was on that sort of stream, and Gord sort of called me out of the blue and said, by the way, Mr. Ballard mentioned your name today. And I went, really? About what? And he said, well, he'd be interested if you thought you might want to take Stan's job. I said, really? Would he offer me the job? And I go, I think he might. And so I went and I loved Jim Gregory, who's absolutely like a second dad for Gord and I. But I went to talk to John McCauley. We shared offices in Toronto. It was a small Toronto office at that time. There was officiating and central scouting out by the airport. You might see it if you go by the 401. It's called the Mantella Building, and it was John McCauley was the referee in chief, working with Scotty Morrison, the not the Scotty Media Morrison, the different Scotty. And I went to John. I just down the hall, and I just said, "What do you think?" And he goes, "You can't turn down a job from the Leafs. They come down up so rarely, to say the least, right?" Yeah. And so I ended up getting hired on draft day when they picked Wendell. And
so that very day,
yeah, Gord, because I was there working for Central.
That's Wendell right here. I'm pointing to right now.
Yeah, you don't even have to say the last name. Everyone knows Wendell, right? And so I got called over by Gord after this first round. Wendell was sitting at the table, and Gord said, "Mr. Ballard wants to talk to you now." And I was there as part of Central Scouting, and so then Harold negotiated my deal in front of Wendell. So I'm sure Wendell wondered what he was getting into. And Gord, of course, had told me to lie about my salary and exaggerate because he cut it back.
Okay, so let's get the specifics. What were you making before you lied to Harold Ballard?
Well, again, this was 1984, and 84, 85 and I was making like $23,000.
So $23,000 a year.
Yeah, at Central Scouting, which was, it was fine. And then I went and sold Mr. Ballard. I was making $28,500. And then he said, well, I'll pay you $27,000.
Okay.
And Wendell's witnessing this. And then I said, I get a company car, and I got mileage, but I drove all over the place, but I didn't have a car. And so he said, well, I'll give you a company car then, because Gord had one. And I said, what about benefits? And he goes, oh, whatever your brother has. Okay. So Gord was making $20,000 at that time. So the next day they had to give Gord a raise to $30,000. So
Gord benefited. That's a 50%. Look at the math skills I have.
You're ciphering like Jethro Bodine here, but yeah, no. So, I mean, no one went to the Gardens for the wealth, and you went for the interest and the passion. That's for sure.
When you get to work for the Toronto Maple Leafs, you're lucky Harold didn't charge you money to work there. Like, that would be the next step.
That
right?
might have been under Conn Smythe. I think that was very much the privilege. No, it was very much of that. If you're not here, I can get somebody else to work for.
They're
less.
Both buried in the same cemetery. Do you know this?
The one in Etobicoke up there,
Park Lawn.
Yeah, I didn't know.
Because I biked there a lot, and one time I think it was. I know now. I know. I asked FOTM Jeff Merrick, where will I find Harold Ballard's grave? Because it's kind of discreet. Like, it's not a standing up stone. It's on the ground. You got to know where it is to find it. And Jeff literally explained, okay, go to this corner, about this many feet, whatever. And I found it. And then I'm just biking around. I saw Jeff Healy's in there.
Wow.
Okay, which is wild. And Conn Smythe is in there, at Park Lawn Cemetery here in South Etobicoke.
Well, I guess Harold was an Etobicoke guy, sort of, right?
He's all over the St. Joe's Health Center in Parkdale. There's a Harold E. Ballard wing or something.
Yeah. Well, it was more. So the story, I think, is he had a house on Montgomery Road, it was right beside Humberview Chevol's, and I think it was given to him by his parents when he got married.
Near the Montgomery Inn.
Yeah, it was up. It was just
Dundas and Islington.
Yeah, just east of Islington. Okay. And so when he moved after his wife died, and everyone said he became much harder after his wife died, harsher, I guess. And his son Billy took over. So Billy. It was moving on up, the Jeffersons. His son, Bill Ballard, who became very wealthy through Concert Productions International and other ventures, he lived in the house. And that was part of the reason that Harold went to jail, was the work that was done on the house by Gardens people. And they kept it till he died, I think, and when it was part of his estate.
Because Harold was living at Maple Leaf Gardens, right?
Yeah, let's see. I think that's a big part of his... The myth that not the myth, but the part that everyone loves. It's like, remember the movie Big with Tom Hanks?
Of course.
Where you get, a kid gets to be an adult. Well, his is the reverse. His is an adult getting to live a kid's lifestyle. So you pick, I don't care what kind of favorite sport you have or whether it's or pastime, but you pick your favorite thing. Can you imagine you love the New York Yankees growing up? You somehow end up tricking the family that owns it into letting you own it. And not only you own it, but you live in the stadium where the Yankees play. So literally every minute your commute to work is nowhere. You order food up from the hot stove lounge for your meals. And
you're right.
You're living the 12-year-old kid's dream. And I think everyone loved that.
And I'm going to ask you for Harold Ballard stories for the next several hours here, Bob. Which typically I've done it with your brother, but who was it? It was a great. I had questions about this living space in Maple Leaf Gardens. Ken Daniels was invited in, and he's kind of broken it down for me. So I'm going to need lots of stories. But here's a little quick how things tie together. Okay, so. You referenced Big, which starred Tom Hanks, right?
Right, yeah.
Tom Hanks, first time many of us saw Tom Hanks was starring in Bosom Buddies with his buddy Peter Scolari. The theme song for Bosom Buddies was Billy Joel's My Life. I don't care what they say anymore. This is my life. Okay. The opening stanza verse of My Life by Billy Joel references Richard Lewis.
Wow.
Who just passed away.
Yeah, yesterday, right?
Well, I learned about it yesterday. I think, it was either yesterday or the day before. But we learned about it yesterday. But Richard Lewis, who I watched in episode 3 of Curb Your Enthusiasm on Monday night.
Is that the episode where he wants to leave money?
100%, yeah.
Yeah, oh, wow.
Yeah. And so just to tie all these little parts together here. Okay, so you're making $27,000 a year. Yeah. You get a car. You helped your brother get a raise because you were making a lot more money than he was.
Selfless as me. That's right.
Good for you. Now, I'm going to read a quick note from FOTM. Mike Hannafin. Mike Hannafin writes in, "Yay, Bob was such a great guy in such a bizarre position. Media relations for the Harold Ballard Leafs. Bob's sense of humor was appreciated by reporters, me included. Or maybe that was how he survived with his sanity intact. So I'm going to lean back and listen, but you're going to tell me what is it like having that gig working for Harold Ballard?"
Well, I mean, yeah, thanks, Mike. That's
I'll go for a bike ride. I'll be back in about 90 minutes.
Yeah,
just go.
But when we talk about with the media, I always felt that my job was advocating for the media, was to try to push, where I think most media relations jobs now to be successful is really keeping the media on the outskirts and whatever. And, probably the low point of my media day was, and Mike might have been there that night, was the night of the famous charge of the dressing room, right? And there's a Ken Daniels part of that later on as well. But the part with Mr. Ballard is that John Ziegler, they announced women are allowed in the dressing room. And again, the dressing rooms are 20% the size of what a major league hockey dressing room is now. The guys are naked. They walk from the shower with their little white towels. They change in a cloakroom that's really like a cloakroom. And there have been issues going back to Jim Gregory about that. He'd been fighting that. So now they decide separate cannot be equal. It's the Brown versus the Board of Education. So Harold Ballard locks all the media out of the dressing room. And so we have a standoff. And then one night the media decided to do the charge of the light brigade. So my job at that point was trying to bring people out, just like they do now, except there's no table. So you say you want to talk to Borja Somming. I go in the room, hey, Borja, come out, blah, blah, blah. Whereas now it's exactly the way every sports thing does it now, right? Except they have a nice table and it's all pretty.
Right.
So while I'm going in to get someone, Bill Houston, I think, was the ringleader, and they all just flood into the dressing room. Now I'm thinking, how do I get them out? Like, what am I going to do here? And the players are looking around going, what do we do? And of course, bad night again, Harold Ballard shows up. He doesn't normally go in the dressing room after every game. He starts screaming at Guy Kinnear, get these effing guys out of here, guy. And Guy goes, it's not me, it's Stellick. It's Bob. I didn't bring him in. And so at that point, I'm 25 years old, 26. I'm ashen, I think. And the media kindly at least leave after Bill Houston and Harold get in a bit of a squabble. And Ken Regan, who just played an NHL game, you wonder why we can't win, turns to me and goes, Bob, if you get fired, we'll go on strike or something to help you out. And I went, I didn't even know what to say. But you know, like, how are you winning when your goalie's more worried about saving the young PR guy's
That's
neck?
such a good point. Like, how times have changed.
Oh, yes. And then, of course, the follow-up is that's Ken Daniels one. I think that was in the Ballard documentary where the next day, Ken Daniels comes down and Harold's going to the dressing room. Again, so much access to ownership, right, that you never get now. And he can't get the key in the door. And Ken Daniels makes some kind of comment. And then Harold, of course, makes some graphic phallic comment about...
I have the clip because Ken, before there was any Harold Ballard documentary, it's Jason Priestley who put together this Harold Ballard, or he directed it, I think. FOTM, Jason Priestley, pardon me. But in fact, then he went on and played, he was in the Bourrier.
Jerry Mack, he played Jerry Mack.
Yeah, isn't that wild? Okay. So, I'm going to play the clip. So prior to all these docs and everything, Ken Daniels, good friend of the show. He's a very good friend of the show, actually. And he's like, hey, Mike, I have some clips you might be interested in. So let's listen to this.
The only thing I can say is that they're a gutless bunch of fools. They come in there, get players half-dressed, want to bring a broad in. That's the worst thing. If the broad comes in naked, I'm going to tell you, it takes her a lot longer to get out than it does to get in. And I told her those were the conditions. Take your clothes off and go on in. Because we got guys there with cocks as long as your arm.
We got to do some bleeping here, guys. Can't use that, Harold.
Why? What's the matter with it?
Harold,
I'm telling the truth. Maybe it'll give them a little more ass somewhere.
Wow.
Yeah, I guess you go uncle after that one, right?
Like, what do you just throw up your arms? Like, what are you going to do, right?
Yeah, and we just always joke that Gord and I would joke to help to keep us sane was that, you can say something, regular and end up on page 82, or you can say something crazy and be on the front page. And, and the funny part was too, like one of his other claims to fame was the Barbara Frum one, right? And
yes.
But the story, again, the background is, as Paul Harvey used to say, the rest of the story was, Dick Beddoes was a friend of Harold Ballard's, right?
Bigly. Yeah. He wrote our pal Hal.
Yeah. And so Dick Beddoes calls, Harold and says, good friend Harold, I've got a radio show tonight at 6:00. You want to be on it? And then Harold, I'll call. Okay, I'll be on, Dick. Call me at 6:00 or whatever. So Dick Beddoes calls him. They start chatting. Harold, unbeknownst to Mr. Ballard, he has no idea. It's actually Barbara Frum's show. And then Dick and him are talking, and then Barbara Frum jumps in.
Wow.
And then Dick did not, Dick sandbagged Harold because he didn't tell him it was the Barbara Frum show because Harold would never come on. Then Harold tells Barbara to shut up. I'm talking to Dick. And he goes, it's my show. And then, of course, women are only good for blah, blah, blah. But
And there was the Adrian Clarkson interview that was on, I think, the National or something.
Again, he cooperated with this stuff. Like when you watch that, like he was like one of those W5 type of shows, except that's CBC. But it's mind-boggling. Sometimes
Journal, maybe it's the Journal.
Yeah, it was the Journal, I think, right? But in the flip side was, I remember there was a Canadian Toronto-based women's club, and it was going bankrupt. And so Harold Ballard got the idea. So I don't know, he calls someone and says, I'm going to buy this and turn it into a Playboy Bunny club. Anyway, and then he goes, I'm going to put the trampoline on the pool, and he's just pulling, and people write this, and it saves the club. The women rally behind the club. So their hatred of Harold Ballard or his misogyny or whatever it was,
right?
Which some of it was certainly just him being ridiculous.
Well, here's the thing. So there was these urban legends in the schoolyards growing up, right? And then one of them was that Harold Ballard would anonymously donate lots of money to good causes. Like there'd be this Harold Ballard might seem like a cheap skate and an asshole, but privately he's doing this, that, and the other. Like, can you tell us now? Was he a generous guy when it wasn't being publicized?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a different era. It wasn't about being up front. But again, look at Maple Leaf Gardens. The public school hockey championships every year at Maple Leaf Gardens. The separate school hockey championships every year. That was free. And I run into people all the time now that the bumping. I played in the Gardens. I mean, that kind of stuff never happens now. I mean, at Christmas he would get a huge amount of money from the cash for the vault, which was a big safe down there, and he would put it in piles. I mean, he, he tried to take the building back from his children to give to charity. And as you mentioned earlier, there are some places like, there's a Harold Ballard garden at the new Bridgepoint. The top floor is all given by his estate.
St. Joe's. So, I've spent some. I had a couple of kids born there, and I had some stuff going on at St. Joe's Health Center. And there's like I think in the maternity ward or something, there's a Harold E. Ballard wing. Yeah,
and that was the sort of his idea, was that he wanted more to go to charity. But again, he had the double-edged sort of fighting with his own children and fighting with everybody else. But he was certainly generous, but not to a fault, but certainly generous to. Gord and I have talked about just his love of Borja, when the fight with Daryl Sittler over money was really Punch Imlach fighting with Daryl Sittler. Punch Imlach coming in as a guy that was well past his best before date, and just deciding I could recreate the '60s again, and terrible mistake, right? Coming after a guy like Jim Gregory who was so forward thinking, but. Guys like Borja, Borja in the early, in the late 70s, early 80s, Borja was making $350,000 a year. Borja holidayed with Harold Ballard. Like, they would go to the Caymans at the end of the season, or on the, Borja could do no wrong. The players every Christmas got a trip for two on an anywhere in the world on an airline. That was a Christmas gift. Players that came from other ones went, holy geez. And Gordon used to always, I used to joke that we were always first class in all the wrong reasons. There was a carpenter at the Gardens, and his wife was quite ill, and Harold sent her to the Mayo Clinic. So if you were healthy, maybe you weren't doing so well, but he had funny things like that. So, and again, he was from a very different era, and he didn't have I say the biggest mistake is he didn't have a son or a daughter that he could turn it over to, and he could become the CEO emeritus or something, right? Like, Mike Gillett had, or a lot of those other guys had.
But he did have TC Puck.
Yeah, he did have TC
Puck. Because Rick Vibe's been on the program, and, he loves to tell this story. He tells this story on Toronto Mike and elsewhere about TC Puck freezing his balls off on the Maple Leaf Gardens ice during the photo.
Yeah, the photo did not matter how good anyone else looked in the photo. It was really how good Harold and his dog looked. And that was the greatest contribution Yolanda had to the Maple Leaf Gardens, as she came up with the idea of putting a towel under the unneutered testicles of Puck.
I'm just going to ask you about Yolanda.
Yeah.
Okay. So Yolanda, she's still with us?
No, she passed recently, a number of years ago. But
a number of years ago? Okay.
She got this. The rumor was she got $5 million and a pair of golds from Steve Stavro to keep quiet, and she did. Again, a loyal crook, right?
Always such a mysterious figures, like in Toronto history. 2020 she died. So 4 years ago now, at the age of 87. Okay, I guess I knew it, and then I forgot I knew it, and I'm like, is she still in Florida or something?
No. Well, but the reason you would have forgot it is she was quiet, but
for a long time, yeah.
But she believed that she was fighting for the building, people thought, and I don't think she really was fighting for the building. She was fighting to get some money, and so she battled with Bill Ballard, and she believed that coincidentally at the time that Mr. Ballard was passing away, and they were fighting over the things, Puck got sick and died, and she believed that Bill poisoned him. And so the rumor was that she gave Puck mouth to mouth to try to keep him going. Couldn't keep him going, put him in a freezer or something, and then took him to Guelph to have him an autopsy, the veterinary college in Guelph.
Yeah, that's where you go. Yeah.
And the veterinary people didn't really want anything to do with her. So to say she was paranoid about Bill Ballard would be an understatement, but Bill Ballard was paranoid about her too. It was a cutthroat fight that, there's a great line that someone says, if a regular person passes away and their siblings or relatives or other people get, for $5,000, who cares? For $5 million, I'll kill you. And we're talking a lot more than $5 million here, right? And so they would kill each other for that. for
But
the
it was
Nats.
Yolanda had the idea to save TC Puck's balls.
She did.
basically. Pardon my French.
She genders, like so. I mean, and
Like a little fabric between the ice and the scrotum. If
that's
you will.
right. And Puck again, multi-millionaire. When there was a guy named Tommy, and his name was Tommy the Dog Walker. That was his nickname because he walked Puck, and he would walk Puck with a rope, not a leash, but a rope that looked like you could tie the Queen Mary up in downtown Toronto, and you'd see him out meandering with Puck. But I mean that again. Now, I mean, Jon Stewart was on a few nights ago sobbing about his dog.
I
and
saw
all the
that.
dogs they brought to work. Harold was the first guy. Bring your dog to work day. It was every day.
Ahead of the curve. But you always say, like sociopathic dictators, murderous, genocide maniacs love their dogs, right? Like I'm thinking of the Adolf Hitler, for example.
Yeah, he had
loved
the
his
great
dog.
German Shepherd or whatever. But I mean, again, quirky things that I never knew about Mr. Ballard while he was alive that I wish that, like, to me, the quirkiest Harold Ballard thing is that someone sent me this, and if you can find on the internet now, is in Samoritz Olympics, Harold Ballard carries the flag for the Canadian team. And
In which Olympics?
like 1918 Samoritz or 1930, well, it wouldn't be 18 because that would have been the war, but if you Google early Samoritz, and he, his family was in skate blade selling the Ballard rocket blade or something, and he was a supplier. It would be like CCM carrying but I was saying that's his power of persuasion and salesmanship, right? And
we're still talking about him, right? Like here we are in 2024, and I'm still, because I was a young teenager when Harold Ballard dies, and I'm still interested in the stories. Because I grew up, you mentioned you got the job when Wendell Clark was drafted. Like that's heyday Leaf love for me, man. Like we got Wendell, and Wendell, to jump around a bit, Wendell's drafted as a defenseman, right? I know you weren't. You were literally hired that day.
Well, no, I scouted him. I went in Saskatoon.
So he was drafted as a defenseman.
He was a roving defenseman in Western Canada, and they always felt they would convert him to a forward.
Kind of like Dave Steeb coming to the Blue Jays as an outfielder.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, Wendell has a great line. I mean, when you talk, and this is a line that anyone who has kids or grandkids playing hockey should note. Wendell's line is, when your kid's starting out, make them have them play defense. They're always going to be able to learn to turn and get the puck, no matter how bad the coach is. If you put your kid on left wing in house league, they may not touch the puck the whole season. The defenseman's got to go back there and fetch it.
Right. That's a great pro tip.
One of the great Wendell's great tips. And again, Harold loved Wendell too. I mean, Wendell. Yeah. When Wendell's back was hurt, when Harold was sick in Florida, Wendell and I flew to Florida to cheer him up. Wow. That was what the people thought that he needed to see some people he liked, and so Wendell's parents came in, and they were down in Florida, and they spent time with Harold Ballard. Les and Alma Clark. Harold loved them and took care of them. He took care of Russ Courtnall's mother all the time. Flew her to Toronto all the time. And all these little quirky things that he did, again, that, like you said, nobody knows about because he did so many other stupid things that were on a macro level.
Speaking of stupid things, and speaking of Russ Courtnall, here we go.
Right, yeah, Gord's trade?
Yeah, just maybe a moment on Gord's trade here. So I know there are listeners, I'm thinking of Manfred from Elephants and Stars, who stand by that trade and think it was a good trade for the Leafs. And Dan Goes Brown used to have this argument with me way back in the day before he was doing anything for The Athletic or Sportsnet or anything. But John Kordick for Russ Courtnall was kind of one of the famous trades. And, John had his substance abuse issues, et cetera, which is tragic. We weren't as sensitive back then to them as we are today. But Russ Courtnall, that trade, I mean, Gord, I've asked him about it a million times, but from your perspective, what are your thoughts as this is going down?
Well, the big issue at that time was really the feeling from the coach, John Brophy, that we lacked toughness, and he hated Russell. Gord and I loved Russ Courtnall. Russ Courtnall was one of our favorite guys and players, and Russ wasn't playing great. The team was playing really well at that time. I think Russ was like fourth liner. Brof kept, he was dying. I mean, he went through I remember him one time going on muttering, and we all love John Brophy too, but he was another guy from a different era.
Look, Hebsy's told me stories.
Oh yeah, but he's in the dressing room going, I need some ink. Some ink. And I go, bro, what do you mean? Some more media coverage? Like you need more media? No, Semenko. I need Semenko. and that was another disaster. Like, so that was he had this long line of recreating Slapshot at the Gardens, and so he put a huge pressure on through Mr. Ballard, because not in a horrible way, but they did that. John Kordick, lovely guy. First day he shows up in the dressing room, either he's got a bad cold, or whatever, and he was sniffing away. And again, a really funny guy, but just so troubled. And you'd heard about his childhood when he would tell you stories, and just it was bad. I mean, and that era of, when we look back, of toughness that we thought everybody had to have, when you look back, it's pretty barbaric sometimes, right?
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah, without a doubt. And a tragic story. And, speaking of going too soon, I mean, John Kordick, God, died far too soon, and just tragic all around. But I think your brother still taking rib shots for the...
well, and Russell never went on to win anything. He's not in the Hall of Fame. Like, it's not like... I mean, Cliff Fletcher saying, I traded guys that are in the Hall of Fame now on bad trades and people. But Russell was such a beloved guy in Toronto too, right?
I think it was the Hound Line. I feel like that was a big moment for when these first youngsters. We were singing the song "Ain't Nothing But the Hound Line." Wendell, Russ, and Gary. Like that was.
Yeah, we had Hound. Gord also, before he ran the team briefly, he ran Newmarket Saints, our farm team. So in order to get attendance, we did Hound Line night. And it was Russ, the three, Gary Lehman, Russ, and Wendell.
Russ, and Gary, yeah.
Came up there to sign autographs. So many people showed up and started pushing down the hall that they had to jump on the tables because they were getting crushed. Like, that was the power of the Hound Line. And
just at that time, as you know, the reason we got Wendell Clark is because of how badly we sucked. Like, there was no lottery at play or whatever. We just finished last, right?
Well, and in fairness to Wendell again too, because Wendell we all love, and there's a statue of him, but we finished last 1 year too late.
I know where you're going.
Because that was Mario Lemieux.
Right. I've always wondered what could have been. Yeah. So think of the delta between a Mario Lemieux and a Wendell Clark.
And Wendell had injury problems right from the get-go. Right? He gave you all he had. But let's put it this way. No one's ever had player. No one's had a conversation where they thought Wendell Clark should be in the Hall of Fame. Like, this has never happened, unless maybe Storm and Norman Rumack. Hammer head alert. I got that story. Hey, I'm just going to bring it up later. Maybe I'll bring it up right now and then I'll come back. I like to jump around a little bit. But James wrote in. James Edgar, how you doing, buddy? I hope to see you on June 27 at TMLX 15. You can bike in from Beaverton there. James writes in, I really enjoyed hearing Bob on The Fan over the years, whether as a guest or... You think he's confusing you with Gord? You never had a regular gig at The Fan, did you? No, I didn't have a regular gig.
He might be confusing you with Gord, but you were on The Fan.
Well, Gord was a regular guy.
Okay, yes, of course. Well, of course. He was an
that was his career.
That's where I'm going. Okay, so of course. Like, listen, do you know where you are, Bob? Come on, we know this. He just says, I have a feeling he's confusing you with Gord, to be honest, as I reread this, because he says he misses you on The Fan, et cetera, et cetera. But this is just my opportunity to say, okay, we're recording right now 1440. But 10 episodes ago, I dropped episode 1430, and we got the origin story. This was just like an homage, we revisited the launch of All Sports Radio, The Fan 1430. And I had guys on. Alan Davis was on this.
Yeah, I heard that. I heard it was a great show.
Yeah, good. And we got a story because Tim Haffey was on the show, and he gave us the origin story for Storm and Norman Rumack's Hammer Head Alert. Hammer Head Alert. So this is a long roundabout way to say Wendell Clark's biggest fan, Storm and Norman, got that Hammerhead Alert inspiration from Tim Haffey, and that story was told in episode 1430.
Oh, really? I mean, Gord and Damien, when they had the afternoons, their shtick was lunch bag letdown.
Right.
And it was trivia as Gord could remember it, I think, at the time. The internet was probably a bit lighter than at that time. But and I remember you talk about talk radio and the same format with this with podcast. Gord, I remember when Gord had the afternoon gig, women would come up to me and say they listened, and they weren't necessarily sports fans. And I'd say, why are you listening? Well, I was on mat leave, and Gord's show is so light on. I just enjoyed listening to them talk, and it's funny how that sort of.
And Barb DiGiulio had a role in that show
Barb
too.
for sure.
I feel like she too would bring in because it was sort of like life's more than just sports.
Yeah. And again, like to Gord's point, everybody can argue the X's and O's and the P's and Q's or whatever, but the average person just wants to listen, enjoy themselves, talk about sport and whatever. Let's not take it too seriously.
You're preaching to the choir.
Yeah.
Part of the reason so now that we're so heavily into like, I guess sports betting is partly to blame, all the negative talks around, but now we're so heavily into like the analytics and, you know, betting and all this stuff that they've taken a lot of the fun out of sports. Like I like the hound line. I like, you know, I liked Wendell all heart there delivering a check on a guy like twice his weight or whatever. And I just miss the fun of sport, and I don't need the deep dive into the analytics for sports betting purposes.
Yeah, I think we've corsied ourselves to death almost, or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, but you're right. I think, you know, we always say that, you know, a part of my business is in marketing is packaged goods, working with packaged good people, but sports are passion goods, and that's what makes the game is that, you know, when we were at the Gardens and we were fighting the historical designation with the city. And our argument there was it's our only business, so it's you're handcuffing us. And this was the mid '80s, and you know, and my point was that Maple Leaf Gardens is a place that, like, it's a cathedral to anything. The city, outside of churches in Toronto, if you went to the Globetrotters, you went to the circus, you went to even church rallies used to
wrestling.
Be there. I mean,
Maple Leaf wrestling.
Harold Ballard loved the Jimmy Swaggarts of the world coming in, because he just thought these guys are the greatest con men of all time. And I remember there was a famous story again of Harold getting in a dispute with one of the guys, maybe it was Jimmy Swaggart, over Bible sales, because Harold wasn't getting a cut.
Wow.
And
well, they were cut from the same cloth.
Yeah. Well, just
a hustler.
A hustler. Yeah. I mean, that's exactly what it was. The world. And when people say, "Oh, how could you work for?" Harold wasn't the worst owner in our division. The St. Louis Blues had Harry Arnest. Harry Arnest made Harold Ballard look like Barack Obama some days, right? And if you watch like the 30 on 30 on Steinbrenner, and you look at that carnival, and you went, holy shit. Like, Harold didn't fire a manager 9 times or whatever it was,
That's
right?
Billy Martin, right?
Yeah. Like, I mean, he, again, but I think that was part of the color of the era, you know, right. And Harold lived beyond when color should have been diminished, I guess, is what it was. Right. But look at the LA Kings. I mean, we lose to them, you know, with Gretzky. I mean, their owner goes to jail, right, for embezzlement and also stealing like Babe Ruth's rookie contract and stuff like. I remember our lawyer at the time, Roseanne Rocky, was talking about. She was talking about the great owner in LA and saying. He said he was a Vietnam veteran. Bruce McNall. Yeah, Bruce was a Vietnam veteran, and, you know, Purple Heart and all that. So I'm going, well, geez, I guess he's a Purple Heart because he was a pretty easy target. Like, I mean, he's a big guy.
He's a big guy.
But he just made it all up. And he only got exposed later on by Forbes magazine.
Oh, wow.
Because Forbes magazine, back again, pre-internet, had the audacity to phone the Koch brothers, who said, these incredibly wealthy family in the U.S.
KOCH.
Yeah, and who said he traded silver with them. And and the Forbes guy could actually get to them. And they said, we have no clue who you're talking about. And then that kind of unwound. And then jail.
You know, now you reminded me, of course, of that Argos purchase by, John Candy, Wayne Gretzky, and Bruce McNall. And what a time that was in Toronto sports.
Well, and a great on-the-field time, but they didn't pay any bills. You know,
not even Rocket's salary.
Rocket and Ishmael got paid, but you know, they rented apartments and they never paid people. It
really, the great one is involved in that.
Well, that wasn't.
You gotta say allegedly.
I mean, no, but Wayne, don't pin any of this on Wayne. Wayne's incredible, but Bruce had this persona of. You could project it back then, and it was harder to find out the truth, I guess.
Absolutely was harder to find out the truth back then. Absolutely. No internet.
Yes, exactly. And maybe people were taking more.
We're naive. We were more trusting, I think. We were more trusting.
Yeah, con men were con men. I mean, but yeah.
It's like the monorail episode of The Simpsons, right? Right?
Yeah.
I've sold monorails to Brockville, Shelbyville.
That's very, very, very true. Very much like The Simpsons have covered everyone, including apparently Harold Ballard. I'm
just crazy, but I loved it because it showed up in 89 and I'm about 15 years old, and I've loved it from the get-go. But then now my oldest son, who's 22, he was a huge fan of it, and kind of because I'd watch it with him on DVD. But I have a 7-year-old who's turning 8, and now we have Disney Plus, and she streams Simpsons like the way I dreamt about stream. I'm like, if somebody told me at like 15 one day I could just stream, 38 seasons of The Simpsons or whatever. But my 7-year-old goes, when I tuck her in for bed, she asks me for Simpsons trivia. Like, I'm just saying, this show just, these kids are being like, these kids are watching the same shows we watch back in the day. It's wild.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you're a true Simpsons aficionado like you are, what's the season that it sort of started to jump the shark?
Oh, so I can tell you because I was
season 9.
No, in my opinion, before that. So I was recording the VHS cassette every episode, even trying to take out the commercials. Which now I wish that's all I had because I can get everything but the commercials. Like I was so short-sighted, but I didn't see this coming.
A lot of bad boy commercials back then.
But you know what? What would you give me the commercials? Why was I spending effort to get rid of commercials when one day in the future I can watch every minute of every episode? Except the Michael Jackson episode, because that's not on Disney+.
Oh, they took that off.
That's gone, but I have the DVD right in this room over here, so I can watch it on DVD there.
I didn't realize that because Michael Jackson isn't canceled on the radio.
They deemed, and I think rightly so when you dig into it, but they felt Michael was using this episode to groom victims.
Ooh.
And as you can imagine, The Simpsons, this is before Disney bought it, so we won't put Disney in here, but the Simpsons people just didn't want to be a part of this, so they pulled it from streaming. They pulled it from syndication, and now it's pulled from streaming. As
a Michael Jackson segue, a great show right now is the documentary on the making of the We Are the World.
I've seen it.
Yeah, and Lionel Richie talking about how weird Michael Jackson's house was, and the snake's missing, and the monkeys are kicking the shit out of somebody. What
has Lionel done to his face? No judgments on my part, but when you look at Lionel Richie in 1985, and then you look at him in 2024... Yeah. It's wild.
He's younger.
He does look younger. He looks better and younger.
Found the youth.
What's going on? But I'm a Tears Are Not Enough man myself. So
you?
You got Neil, you got Joni. I just dropped an episode with Alfie Zappacosta just yesterday. He was on that Tears Are Not Enough. Yeah.
They were, big local band, right?
Well, Zappacosta was a local guy, but he moved to Edmonton like 30 years ago or something.
Really?
He's been in Edmonton ever since. But yeah, he was the...
I always rate guys that were almost like high school bands around Toronto, right? And
that'd be like Max Webster?
For sure. Every year Max Webster, there was...
April Wine.
April Wine was a big one. The Stampeders were a big one.
That's how Rush starts, right?
Yeah, Gord said Rush played Woodbine Junior High School when he was in grade 8, but I don't know. That may or may not have happened. Gord remembers it, but I don't think they're probably very good because they would be about the same age. They were probably 14 at the time playing.
Wow. Would Triumph have done that?
I don't think Triumph did. I don't remember Triumph at never went to my school in North York. But
I'll ask FOTM Rick Emmett about that one for sure. I'm working on something. I can't announce it now, but I'm working on something with Rick and a professional baseball league in this.
He's a super baseball fan.
Yeah, he was. We talked about his slow pitch career. Okay, so I'm going to bring us back because I got a note from Mike Ross. Do you know Mike?
Yeah.
He'd love to hear, and Mike Ross and FOTM, but so is this gentleman I'm going to reference right now, would love to hear any memories, stories of working with a young Jimmy Holmstrom. Bob and Gord gave Jimmy his start with the Toronto Maple Leafs. I've had Jimmy in the basement with Mike Ross. Please, what do you remember about hiring a young Jimmy Holmstrom? You and I guess it was Gord who did the hiring.
Yeah, it was sort of, we had a Brian Larder was the guy before that. The Gardens lacked in sophistication in a sound system. That was one of the first things when I was able to get in there. We actually put in a new sound system so you could actually do something with it because we weren't even really qualified to have anthem singers properly. Wow. And
you had the Beatles in there.
Well, they brought their own sound system, and probably was 400 watts.
Dr. Diane Sachs, who's a city councilor now, but she's also a FOTM, and she's a client of mine, actually. She was at one of those Beatles shows. I don't think anyone
heard anything.
No,
I think there's a great stories about how they lacked wattage too, right?
Right.
But yeah, so the Gardens entertainment consisted of the 48th Highlanders on opening night. Ralph Fraser was on the organ, and then Ralph sort of left. Brian Larder came in and it wasn't working. And then it was trying out somebody else. And then, Jimmy Holmstrom's the shortstop who takes a day off. And then Jimmy just comes in and plays shortstop for the next 40 years.
Well, no, you're thinking of Wally Pipp.
Yeah. But
he came out, Lou Gehrig took a spot.
Yeah, exactly. Never got another time again.
Yeah, Wally Pipp.
And Jimmy was, again, super keen, super reliable, very talented, and is a great
Sure.
hockey fan. He's sort of he's worn the seat to this day, which is
That's
quite
a long run.
Well, you truly have to be a gentle, loving person to get along with that many generations of MLAC and MLG, and everybody hates music. I remember people would complain about your playlist all the time. I remember being like across the street after a game at Garduni's, and the guy that came every game was complaining. I said, "You write out 10 songs you want, we'll play them next game." So we played them next game. So, like that's how, I don't know. What do you like?
Yeah, just give us more Van Halen Jump.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
That's a staple.
Yeah, that's a staple. That's right. Yeah, they. And again, the sophistication, the changes, or whatever it was. I mean, it was something.
Tell me so now I have specific points. I didn't want to miss these points, but can you tell me? I'm old enough to remember King Clancy in the bunker there with Harold Ballard, and you'd go to a game. I'd always be in the Grays, and there you'd see King Clancy and Harold Ballard. Like that was just.
Yeah.
In the bunker.
Mutt and Jeff.
But, some people are younger than me, but what can you tell us about King Clancy?
Well, King was there the first couple of years that I was there. And King had evolved by that point in time. So he was King, the Pal Hal's sidekick. And, when King was younger, he had a lot more opinion. His son, Terry, played on the team. That made it really tough. Imagine being coach, John McClellan of the team, and you're not giving Terry Clancy enough ice time.
Right.
That was tough. And we believe some of Harold's worst comments, like Inga Hammerstrong, 6 eggs in the corner, were really King Clancy lines that Harold owned. It's like the Kramer from Seinfeld selling his lines to
Peterman.
And because Harold wasn't a funny guy, and so he took lines that cling.
King was punching up these lines.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Well, I mean, if we played poorly, I always remember King would come in and say, "We played flatter last night than piss on a platter." And his other good line more PG was, "I'm a big wheel, I just don't turn." And so he was very humble and at that era, and just a very, very gentle guy. And that was where we set up with Gare Joyce in his Wendell's rookie year for MVP magazine. The King and the Kid was a big piece that Gare wrote early in his career, and it was sort of caught them really nicely, and that was not long after that King passed. But again, I remember his funeral was incredible because they said it was something like the largest funeral in Toronto history because he was so beloved. The police all volunteered, so we literally had 80. It seemed like 80 police motorcycles, and so when they went from the service at I think St. Mike's or whatever, they did a lap around the building, and all the employees stood outside and saluted. Wow. And he lay in state at Maple Leaf Gardens, and Harold lay in state too. And people came to see Harold too. But King had huge lineups. People would wait. It was like the David Beckham lineup thing. People would wait 3 hours to see King Clancy. It was kind of a thing back then to pay respects, right? Which now...
Again, we were bored, right? No internet.
Exactly.
No streaming. Who can watch another episode of Leave It to Beaver on CKVR? It's like, I'll go check out this dead guy.
And before they closed the casket, Harold apparently put in a copy of the racing form in his hand.
Okay, there you go. Shout out to FOTM Peter Gross.
Oh gosh,
always has the racing form in his hand.
Yeah. That's definitely.
All right. Speaking of shout outs, you dropped his name there. So I know he's listening in Kingston, and he's a dear, beloved member of the TMU, the Toronto Mike Universe. But you mentioned Gare Joyce. So Gare Joyce, what was he doing with King Clancy there for MVP?
It was a feature, and it was trying to get the two of them all coordinated, because I mean, Wendell, like a lot of guys, wasn't always thrilled to do stuff, and King and Gare was trying to get this big piece about just because King really liked the way he played. Conn Smythe would have died in happiness over Wendell. If you can't beat him in the alley.
We all fell in love with the way he played. Yeah, if you can't beat him in the alley.
Yeah. And we actually had we actually felt Wendell should have won Rookie of the Year that year, and
who won it that year?
It was a guy from Montreal that didn't play 3 years, a Swede, and what was his name? And Wendell had 37 goals he only had 11 assists, and he hit a pretty bad.
I remember that number. Yeah,
he only had his plus minus wasn't great in our team either. But we were sure that
what a terrible team that was.
Yeah, it was payback for Harold. The media voted, and they hated Harold, right? But
was it the year after? What was the year where we swept the Blackhawks in 3? It was a best of 5, and then we went 7 games against the Blues.
Yeah, that was the Secord Sucks year. And then we ended up getting Al. And
that felt good. Like, I don't know what it was. Maybe we were so loud because I missed all those decent years in the late 70s or what. Like, I completely missed.
No, it was that the playoffs again. 4 to 5 teams made it in the good old Norris division. So you had but
it's true.
But the reason those games were partly so special was, again, tickets were cheap compared to today, and subscribers didn't pick up their playoff tickets. So the golds were just full of real fans paying not a huge amount of money, bringing sparklers and brooms and chanting at Al Secord. So
that's right.
It was probably the end of the era of the authentic sports fan being able to afford to go in a building. But
good point, Bob. Good point. But that was that. I mean, watching on television that sweep there in 3.
Well, Bob McGill fought like every game there was that era where we nothing against Ty Domi, but by the end of Ty's era, in my opinion, you could put the fights on an intermission. You just put a ring up and have a fight but then it changed games and Chicago Stadium had the smallest rink then in the Bruins. It was 10 feet shorter than a rink, and they would try. You had to survive the first 7 minutes of the game in Chicago. It was deafening. You talk about Jimmy Holmstrom,
loudest arena in the league.
The organ was gigantic. They had this great anthem singer, and they just rocked. And Big Daddy Bobby McGill fought every game to draws that made everybody braver, because you really had to be brave. Now, nothing against Mitch Marner, but you don't have to be brave.
You don't need a Semenko anymore.
No, or even, but those were just cement. Those were fights of, I don't like you. Right. Like those St. Louis fights, you had Danny Daouf fighting and getting his nose broken, and Leith Douglas, our plastic surgeon, fixing his nose in the dressing room. It was like something out of not Slapshot, but because the rinks looked like Slapshot, but it was something over. We had to stand as a team. It wasn't just one or two guys. We didn't bring in the fourth line guy to, and back then guys did take hits without having to fight. Like now, that's the most ridiculous thing in the NHL.
You might be right. Nowadays, you throw a clean hit and a good clean hit, and it's fighting time. I don't understand how the game changed in that regard.
Well, I think the greatest thing about the PWHL is how these women hit each other and then just stand up and they skate and they keep going. Like the most brilliant marketing of that show that league is. They allow full contact, even though they say they don't. No one even really knows. I think they're real, but give them credit. They wallop each other. They get up, and in the NHL, no one can wallop anybody anymore. They're not even forget headhunting. It's just a decent check.
Very interesting. So shout out to Gare Joyce if you're listening in Kingston. What was it like? So you're the spokesperson for the Toronto Maple Leafs when your brother Gord resigns as general manager. So you're the guy who has to announce that to the media.
Yeah, so Gord had his own press conference, and the Westbury Hotel, which is where we kept the players, they gave him a room for free. Nice of them, the people there. Again, Gord, friend of the Westbury, and Gord's line was, "I thought public executions were in Canada had been outlawed." That's
a great line,
and because that was really Milt Donnell did a lynching of him, Milt is a legendary sports guy, but again, sports guys had so much power back then, which they don't have now, right? And but the next day, I had to make a decision whether I was going to stay or not, because Gord's left. Mr. Ballard comes down. Again, this was the flip side of Harold Ballard. I'm thinking he comes to my office and he was getting his mail or something, and he looks down and you're looking at Grandpa and you don't know where it's going to go. And I said, Mr. Ballard, because he was sad that Gord left. Like he really, really, really liked Gord, and I think he regretted being such an asshole, right? So, but you weren't sure if he was going to double down on being double asshole or back off, because you had no feel, right? And this is uncharted turf. So I just said to him, Mr. Ballard, if you have trouble with me working here after Gord has quit, I'll leave today. And he went, no, absolutely not. No. It just, and then he walked away, and it was never mentioned again. It was kind of sad that way, right? In that, you took he never gave Gord any tools to succeed payroll wise.
Well, Gord would quit. He quit because he had no autonomy at all, right?
He decided that George Armstrong was going to, this even hurt George Armstrong, who we all dearly love too, but George and Gord had concocted a plan. So Harold Ballard has decided that George Armstrong was going to be coach for the next year as well. Remember, he was brought in, and he didn't want to coach. He was kind of forced to coach. And so Gord said to George, He gave him a 3-year contract, assistant GM. But George, the whole key was George had to go in and tell Harold that he wouldn't coach. So George went in to tell Harold that he wasn't going to coach, and Harold wouldn't hear any of it. So George tried, but then it didn't work. So then Gord ended up quitting, and George was really upset because, now because Gord's point was, if he fires you, George, you still got this 3-year contract, and Harold won't want to pay you out, so he'll keep you working. And so the flip side was George ended up not coaching anyway. Floyd Smith came in and sort of did interim and then made changes anyway. So it worked out well for everybody except Gord.
I have a ruling from the VP of Sales on the live stream who heard us talking about Wendell Clark not winning the Calder Trophy. 11 assists, eh? That's difficult to do. I feel like you play enough games, you'll get more than 11 assists by just being
Am I
there.
being corrected here?
No, you're right. You're being corrected in that the person who won it was not who you remembered winning. It was Gary Suter. You're not thinking of Gary Suter because he's American, right? Gary Suter won it the year that Wendell was eligible to win the Calder. VP can double check here, but
can you check that for? Because
what do you remember? Tell me, and I'll Google it.
Swedish guy in Montreal.
He finished third.
Oh, you know what? He finished. He was the. Yeah, that's right.
And I have his name too.
He was touted, and then
Keldalen.
Yeah, Sheldalen.
Sheldalen.
That he faded at the end. That's right.
Right. So he was the other finalist.
Yeah.
He finished third, but Gary Suter was the actual winner of that. Who would go on to hurt Gretzky, right? And
exactly.
It's all coming full.
But what was Wendell's plus minus? Your VP of Sales was plus minus.
VP. We want Wendell Clark's plus minus that season.
Minus 27 or minus 32 or something like that.
You accidentally get 11 assists if you're playing every game. But okay, so
that's funny.
How does it end for you, Bob Stellick, working for the Toronto Maple Leafs?
So it ended really when Ken Dryden came in. So Cliff Fletcher gets fired. So Cliff Fletcher, when he came in, I wasn't his guy either. So I had to sort of rebuild my thing. And then I decided everybody wanted to be a hockey guy. So under Cliff, I decided I'll take all the business stuff. So I did all the business stuff of the Toronto Maple Leafs except for player contracts and that. So I booked the planes, the hotels. I worked with the marketing department on all the promotions. We hired the staff that ran the summer programs. We did all that kind of stuff. It was tons and tons of fun. And then after Pat Burns left, and then it started, going south for Cliff too, right? And Stavro really wanted him out, and the rumor was that that Ken Dryden was going to be this guy, and so Ken Dryden came in, and I really, really still this day I really like Ken Dryden. Good, really great guy.
He's an Etobicoke guy.
He's an Etobicoke guy, and his dad created that wonderful charity, Sleeping Children Around the World. A super honorable family. But Ken had never had a job like this, right? Like he never had an office job. He never had a job, and so Ken's first day there, he's doing his speech, and he's got a really long speech.
And it takes him a long time to read a speech.
Yes. So, and in fairness, Ken gives it to me.
He's no Bob Stellick.
Yeah. Ken gives it to me to look over. So I said to Ken, I give it back, and I said, you got Stanley Cup in there 11 times or whatever. And I said, people throw that around really lightly here. I know you won a lot in Montreal, but maybe you could use a few synonyms there, compete for divisions or whatever. Anyway, Ken came back 10 minutes later and said, no, I'm doing this. And then he starts in his speech, and it's all about imagining players can be better, that 15-goal scorer can get 30 goals and all that. And again,
is that like pyramid power?
Yeah, pyramid power, like Red Kelly. And I just remember all the media, everyone's kind of a bit glazed trying to figure this out. And so then after that, Ken came in. I don't know what McKinsey consultant he went to, but he decided to put everyone on probation. So he came in, he said, Bob, you're on probation for 3 months or something. I said, Ken, you can evaluate me on 12 years, but you're not going to evaluate me on 12 years and 3 months. I'm not going to do that, and it was just, I just didn't get a feel at this time that it was going to go well. I was terrified that if I quit, they'd win a Stanley Cup within 2 years, and I'd give up on a ring.
You go, phew.
Yeah, so the fact that it's 25 years later, boy, small comfort to Leaf fans, but big comfort to Bob Stellick.
If they win it this year, they should give you a ring.
Yeah, that's right. He gets a ring.
If you know what? Everyone should get a ring who had to endure that Ballard years. Everyone who's still alive and had to endure the Ballard years.
Well, I feel the palm has passed us right there. That's a ring substitute, so thank you for that.
No, absolutely. By the way, I have a ruling from VP. You nailed it. The plus minus for Wendell Clark that season was minus 27.
Yeah, we talk about trying to promote him. We had a thing we did a PR campaign, like old style, a coal miner's daughter type PR campaign.
Yeah.
So there's a guy I went to high school with who was in a band called Cats Can't Fly, and he did a song called Clark for Calder, and we made a 45 of it, and then we mailed it to every one who had a valet for that, and then all the radio stations, because it didn't quite take off like Honky the Christmas Goose.
I was gonna say, I never heard of this, and I feel like I wish I had a copy of this. Clark, did it ever leak? Or
I don't know if it ever ended up on YouTube or not. Clark for Calder, but.
Found it, everybody. Clark for Calder, 1986.
Number one with a bullet.
Yeah, it's no Honky the Christmas Goose.
Yeah, Honky. Yeah, Honky. Well, Clark for Clark for third for Calder isn't going to help.
Clark for Calder never did score 50 goals of this team, but hammered by injuries, the knees, the back. I still remember learning, Wendell Clark, I think he was like 27 years old or something. And I remember being like, even young Mike was like, that's a 27-year-old guy. He just carried himself like he was pushing 40. You know what I mean? Like he really did just appeared like he was, he had the back, the knees. He had played hard. He always looked old. I'm looking at this photo here. He looked like he was pushing 40, but he was 27 years old. Yeah.
I mean, even when we talk about beloved in, when one of his back injuries, he ended up going to England to a specialist that was recommended by Ken Thompson, Lord Thompson of Fleet.
Wow.
And so Wendell's over in England getting, I think he said like in Lord Thompson's townhouse or something, getting a Rolls Royce limo for his therapy session. So the fact that you could get Ken Thompson, who I don't think ever came to a hockey game, excited about you, was a tribute to Wendell.
What a time to be alive. Okay, earlier you were talking about, you were focusing on the business stuff before you left working for the Leafs when Ken Dryden was there. I just want to shout out a podcast that will help you with your financial investments, whether you have a trusted financial advisor or manage your own investment plans. So, Bob, take a note. The Advantaged Investor podcast from Raymond James Canada. It provides the engaging wealth management information that you value as you pursue your most important goals, Bob. So you're going to subscribe?
Absolutely. Thank you very much for that tip.
You got any old electronics, old devices, old phones? Maybe you got a Palm Pilot. Maybe you have a drawer full of cables at home. All of the above,
All
Bob?
of the above, yeah.
Okay.
Well, our road phone was the first cell phone we ever had. We call it the road phone. That was the first cell phone.
The road phone.
Yes, that was the first one we got. Big brick that we
still
carried
have
on
it?
the road. No, we literally transferred it around whoever was traveling with the team on the road, because otherwise you had to leave a message in a hotel.
Wow. Well, Zach Morris had one of those. Now, if you have any of those at home, you go to recyclemyelectronics.ca, you put in your postal code, it'll be, drop it off here. It's only a block away or whatever. And then it'll get properly recycled so that the chemicals don't end up in our landfill. So you got lots of homework here, Bob.
I do.
Okay. Now I'm going back to the questions. One thing though, when you leave with Ken Dryden, so I know you played a role in converting Maple Leaf Gardens to the Loblaws/Mattamy, speaking of the PWHL team that plays there now. And that's where I met Wendell Clark when he put Bleeding Blue, written by FOTM Jim Lang. Really? I got invited to have a beer and hang of Wendell, and I'm like, I would like to do that. Okay, so what role did you play in the Maple Leaf Gardens farewell in that conversion? Yeah,
it was in the PR and just advising them a bit on the hockey side of the operation that they were looking to set up. At that time, Ryerson had a really poor hockey program. Because they couldn't recruit. They played at George Bell Arena,
which I love. But my oldest played there for 10 years, and I love that old.
Yeah, well, they got like subway tokens in order to get to it, I guess, every day. But they struggled, and so it was really a bit about the respect the past, represent the future type of thing with them, and they really did a spectacular job, them and Loblaw. So they took advantage of the big dip in 2008 in real estate, where the federal government, Flaherty was the finance minister,
right? And
they were able to get like several $100 million in federal government infrastructure money, and what they recreated there, I think, is been spectacular. And they kept all the outside things. And so we did the opening. Stephen Harper showed up, who smart Leaf fan too. He wrote a book on the Leafs at one point, but he actually came up with one of the best trivia lines that nobody seems to get is when people say who's the founder or who's the man behind the Toronto Maple Leafs, everyone says Conn Smythe. And it's actually not Conn Smythe at all. It's J.P. Bickle. And J.P. Bickle was the financier who financed Conn Smythe but didn't want any PR. He's the antichrist of Harold Ballard.
Yeah, the
and when he died, he created a foundation that's given away hundreds of millions of dollars to sick kids and other charities. But Harper referenced it, and I thought, wow, you were on the ball, Stephen Harper, for that. And but yeah, no, everything they did, they kept the roof perfectly. They just elevated it to the green level for the ice surface.
Right.
And I mean, the only thing they didn't do, which again, classic hockey things. And as a guy, I went to U of T and played intramural hockey at U of T. And the biggest problem was, varsity. What do you do with your equipment all day? And as a commuter, because I didn't live there. And so I said, I really pushed hard. And the athletic director was more of a soccer guy at that point. And I said, you got to create a hockey equipment check area. And he goes, what do you mean? So, I said, if the guys come down and playing intramural that day, they can leave their equipment there. Maybe they can, and they never did that. So I have no idea how the intramurals did after that. But I was down there this year for the PWHL women's game, and it's worth, I know you can't get tickets to the women's games anyway because they're sold out, but it's worth going to any event at Mattamy just to see the building.
Absolutely. I think they did a great job as well, converting that, because keeping the facade is vital. And then I thought they did a great job. So whatever role you played, good for you.
Yeah, I didn't paint the roof personally, but that actually looks really good too.
Well, they built Maple Leaf Gardens in 6 months or something.
Yeah, I get that's one of the things people gave me a shot for. Early on in my career, I think Global was on a broadcast. And they did.
Was it Mark Hebshire?
No, it was they did more of a feature in the intermission about whatever. And I said something like, they built it in 16 months or whatever. I said, you couldn't get a garage built in Toronto in that time. And of course, that became, every time people would say, hey, Bob, how long does it take to build a garage in Toronto? And I go, shut up. But yeah, that's it. But they say part of the trivia on that is they say that the one side of the building doesn't match the other side of the building.
Oh, because they built...
it wasn't the pyramids, and the walls were super thick.
You need that level. You got to make sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, wow. Okay. A couple of notes came in for you. Hey, Ref. Hello, Hey, Ref. Hey, Ref is named Hey, Ref because he referees hockey games.
Right.
Did he play... This is you, Bob. Okay. Did he play hockey at Don Mills Arena? I know that's where they lived as kids. Has he been there lately? Dumpiest arena in the city by a mile.
Yeah, no, we did play a bit. I mean, Gord and I played at Woodbine Arena, mostly Don Valley Village, but our all-star team played at Don Mills in time. And Gord and I actually were both referees as well. And we took our referee training at Don Mills Arena, where the referee in chief from the GTHL was a cop who was a bit out to lunch. We thought, because as he was training us, he was telling us how soon the NHL and the WHA would be drafting referees. And Gord and I both were like 14 and 16 looking at each other going, I don't think this is going to happen. But yeah, no, but they're supposed to build a new, Brian Finley, who works with me, lives right around there and plays there with his Mustang kids team. And they're supposed to be building a new double pad or 4-pad, but that's like fixing the Gardner Expressway or something. It'll be someone else.
Hey, Ref wants some lipstick on that pig over there.
Yeah.
Okay. Jesse Hirsch. Hello, Jesse. Jesse's on the farm right now. Speaking of pigs, he's a farmer now. This guy just up and left and became a farmer. Jesse Hirsch says, regarding Bob Stellick, ask him about the effort to bring the Bills to Toronto and other NFL Toronto efforts. He worked on the team that did the first Bills in Toronto series,
right, yes,
which was done by Rogers in the late 2000s. What can you tell us about the... I remember being duped by the Toronto Bills.
Yeah, it was a dupe. Ted Rogers was shockingly like Harold Ballard in a number of different ways, in the sense of that old style. And I worked first with him a little bit on when the Blue Jays, Rogers got involved with the Blue Jays with Labatt, and we had to take him around the dressing room and make sure that he knew who Carlos Delgado was, and that, like, he was like Mr. Burns going around the dressing room. He had no idea who anybody was.
Great callback, talking softball.
And he, so then we started working on the Bills. I got some work on the Bills Toronto series, and the mistake is it's that reverse pricing. It's what's happening right now.
Surges now.
It's the pricing that's going to happen for the $380 million Toronto's paying for these FIFA games. So they make this deal with the Bills that's too expensive, and now they're trying to reverse engineer that they can afford to actually pay it through ticket prices, right? And also fool people that people really want to go to a preseason NFL game at big bucks.
Right.
But I remember being in a room where before Ted Rogers comes in, everyone's pre-planning how we're going to deal with Ted Rogers, to make sure we're going to manage him, right? He walks in, he could care less about football. And he goes, how much are we paying? I don't know what is $22 million to the Bills. Okay, so that means we need it on $44 million minimum revenue guaranteed, right? Bye. And he just leaves. And of course, and everyone in the room's going, we can't get that much revenue. But no one wanted to tell him.
Wow. Okay, what do you think about the fact this is I'm going to come back to Jesse Hirsch's Toronto Bills thing, but what do you think about the fact that outside the dome, I know it's called Rogers Center now, but outside the Sky Dome, there's a statue of Ted Rogers. Where's the statue of Joe frickin' Carter? I don't know, hopping around the bases, touching them all, like Tom Cheek said.
Yeah, that's...
Come on. I'm stuck. Listen, I have no, Rogers, Bell. It's all, to me, it's all the same. I don't have any allegiance here.
I don't think Ted even thinks he should be there. He should be.
He's going to be there. He should be surrounded by. How about a bat flip from Batista?
Yeah, good point.
Maybe Dave Steve with his no-hitter, putting his hands in the air.
You could hire the Leaf statue guy down there. He's not working right now. I think he's in Chicago, though, which I thought was a bit weird to hire an American to make Leaf statues.
Because I like what they've done with that Leaf. They keep adding new bodies and stuff. I'm going to ask you about one guy there, but I like what they did with the Leaf players outside of
I'm not as keen on retiring all the numbers, but we had a different strategy.
Right. Well, we used to retire it because somebody would die, like Bill Barilko, or almost die, like Ace Bailey.
We used the argument, and this was our argument, that the Leafs only retired for catastrophic reasons, and we honored people, like which we did. But Dave Keon was really the one, the catalyst for that, because he refused to be honored. He wanted to retire. So Dave Keon led to 20 number retirements or whatever it was.
This is the insight. You've been a great guest. I have a few more questions here, but I'm gonna just for the Toronto Bills thing. What role did Bon Jovi play in this? Like, I just remember Bon Jovi being involved in the Toronto Bills.
Are you saying he wouldn't back down?
No, that's Tom Petty.
Oh, Tom Petty, sorry.
I'm not fixing that in post, Bob. Afterwards, Mike, just edit out. I know you don't edit. Just edit out 20 seconds, okay?
No, sorry about that.
It's okay. You got your Bobs mixed up. We all do that.
I think he was more, again, these figurehead guys that everybody wanted to throw into them,
He sucks, right, Bon Jovi? What do you think of Bon Jovi?
No. I guess his voice is gone, though, hasn't it?
I don't know. Even when his voice was there, it kind of sucked.
My favorite Bon Jovi story was when they first started out, they all went on their first tour of us and they all brought their own bowling balls.
Is that right?
Yeah, that was the story. The guys in the band go, hey, we're from Jersey. We bowl. I don't know. But
Johnny used to work on the docks.
Yeah. But it was ill-fated, the whole thing. And that was another one
we were duped. Like we said off the top, we were used.
Ralph Wilson was a Harold Ballard. Imagine naming your stadium after Harold Ballard. Didn't change Maple Leaf Gardens to Harold Ballard Gardens.
That's true.
Ralph Wilson has a freaking stadium named after him while he's alive.
That's true. That's a good point there. Okay, so I have a note that came in from VP of Sales. I didn't know he was going to be on the live stream providing all this real-time trivia. He's doing a great job.
Tripping me up is what he's doing.
You tripped yourself up by confusing the
Shell Darlene with Gary Suter.
A couple of mistakes. We can't all be perfect, Bob. Gord wasn't perfect either.
Well, Gord's the trivia king.
Well, when Gord fucks up, Damien just smacks him upside the head and gets him straight here. Okay, so this is the question. It's not a question, but a long belated thanks. This is nice. Okay. When I played House League, and again, this is VP of Sales. When I played House League hockey in Burlington, we'd have end-of-the-year banquets. The first year I played, I was 13, but played a level down because I could barely skate. My dad, on a whim, reached out to the Leafs to see if he could get a player to show up at our banquet. I'm 99% sure he ended up talking to Bob, and Bob came through. In the spring of 1988, Motor City Smitty himself, Brad Smith, came to his minor Pee Wee House League banquet and blew all of their minds. I fucking loved it at the Maple Leaf Gardens when he had no helmet and the hair would be blowing. Amazing. Okay. He hadn't played that season as he had a back injury that ended his career, but it was incredible. Smitty came back the next year too. He had fully retired at that point, so not sure if Bob hooked that up again or if my dad stayed in touch with Smitty. He doesn't remember. But thanks to Bob for making a bunch of 12, 13-year-old boys very happy. I remember one of the tips he shared with us was, don't go offside on an odd man rush. That's a great tip.
That's sophisticated hockey at that time.
Yeah,
and
it's true.
don't
today
wear a
as it was
helmet.
back then, right?
Don't wear a helmet. Helmets are overrated.
Helmets are overrated. I gotta write that down for my 9-year-old. He plays at Mimico Arena.
Oh, yeah.
Don't go offside on an odd man rush. That is a great tip, no matter what level of hockey you're playing.
Yeah, Motor City is a wonderful guy. He's a scout in the NHL now, and great guy. And he had a charter fishing boat in the summer called Motor City Charters, and I remember
all needed side hustles, right? John Anderson had the restaurants,
and he had that bounce up and down from the minors, that's the hardest lifestyle. And I remember his first wife had a line that she said something like, most people when they go to town, professional athletes, they buy a home and then they get traded as soon as they buy a home. We buy a T-shirt and then we get traded. So that was one of the great lines.
Oh man, these are great memories here. Eric wrote in and says, does Bob remember the night Mike Gardner had his stick launched into the crowd at Maple Leaf Gardens? It would have been the 1994 playoffs. A fan quickly tossed Gardner's stick back over the glass and was rewarded for the action. If memory serves, Bob presented the fan with a signed stick. Maybe it was live on Hockey Night in Canada. What's Eric remembering here? Do you remember this at all?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny because it shows up every once in a while on TSN's quirky things in a hockey game. And so the story was it popped over his stick, Mike Gardner's stick popped over the glass. He doesn't know where it is. He's spinning around looking, and he looks in the audience and he sees a guy holding it, and he gestures, and the guy pitchforks it back onto him, and then Gardner takes the puck out. So the backstory there is, I think I'm talking to Gord, and I think might have been Gord was a broadcaster at that time, and we said, we got to get this guy a stick. So I called down, and we had a stick boy at that time at the Gardens named Chop Chop, whose nickname when he's in Newmark because he went pretty slowly. So the trainer called him Chop Chop, like speed up all the time. Chop.
Sure.
And so I called down and I said, back then, again, the quirky building, you had to call to the medical room across the Gardens, and I called there to one of the St. John's ambulance guys or the ambulance guys. I said, can you tell Chop Chop to go give that guy a stick? So the guy comes out. I can see him talking because, again, the building's not that big.
Yeah.
And he's talking, and then Chop Chop's leaning against the wall behind the bench, and then the guy goes away, and then Chop doesn't move. One whistle happens, nothing moves. So then I called down again, and I said to the guy, the guy picks up the phone again. I don't even know who he is, but I said, Reiner, did you talk to the equipment, the stick boy there, and tell him to take a stick? He goes, I did. I said, well, can you remind him? And then he comes out again. I see him talking again. Chop Chop's not the brightest guy in the world. And I see Chop Chop, we call it in hockey, it's what the referee used to give you, the shoo-shoo, the backhand. I see him give the shoo-shoo. I said, the guy goes, he won't do it now. And I go, tell him I'm on my way down. I slammed the phone. So I get down there, and at the same time, Ron McLean has the same idea. And he's coming out of the broadcast thing, which is right across the good. He goes, and I said, well, I'm going to do a stick. He goes, we're going to do the stick. And he goes, can you wait till a commercial break, after commercial break, and we'll do it together. And that was the shtick.
Wow.
The shtick for the shtick.
The shtick for the shtick for the stick. I love it. How was it difficult to deal with any Toronto media personalities that were covering the Leafs in your heyday? Like, do you want to out them? And specifically, what was it like dealing with Mark Hebscher?
Is that Mark Hebscher asking?
That's a friend of Mark Hebscher, Toronto Mike asking.
Yeah, I mean, Hebsy, give him credit. I mean, his claim to fame that I inadvertently got involved with was, and I don't know if he knows this story, but we're opening the season again. I think it's 85 or 86, and I see Pat Marson had this thing that he always claimed he was banned from the Gardens. He was a CFTO sports guy. Sure. So my first year, I couriered him back when currying was a big deal. I couriered him his press pass because I thought, you're not banned from here. You're just too lazy to come down, right? You don't want to come down. You like trashing Harold Ballard on the broadcaster night. So, any nice guy, Pat, fine. Don't ever see him. Then I see opening game, whatever. I see Pat Marsden. It was probably opening midweek game. And I said, Pat, he's in the hot stove lunch, having lunch. I said, hey, you coming down to the game? He goes, coming down to the game? I'm on the broadcast. I went, oh boy, this is not going to go well. And of course, we get waxed. And he launches into a tirade on our own broadcast at us. And then, of course, Harold Ballard wants him off the air. Sure. And then I thought they were going to throw Jim Taddy into that role. And then Hebsy came back. So Hebsy became the intermission guy by virtue of Harold Ballard. That was, Hebsy was able to elevate himself from 11:30 at night to not ready for primetime Hebsy.
Love it. It's all amazing. Love it so much. What about John Gallagher? Any Gallagher stories?
Gallagher seems to know everyone on social media in the history of the world. Plus, he got a picture of him.
Because he had the disposable camera on him at all times.
I'm sure when Fred Kodak comes out his birthday, that Gallagher will have a picture. I mean, again, he's kind of the media's Ty Domi almost, right? Friend of everyone important, I guess. Good for him.
So no exciting, I always hear stories about him like sneaking into the gardens by like plying off some security guy at the gardens or whatever. But
no, I mean the people. I mean Jim McKenney built an incredible career at City TV. Huge love for him. Catherine Humphreys was fantastic.
Well, that's why McKenney got fired.
Yeah.
Because of Catherine Humphreys.
Yeah, and
she was too good.
She was too good. Yeah, that's exactly what it was.
He said it to me here. Yeah.
Yeah. He was too.
Well, he's best friends with Peter Gross, by the way.
Yeah. She, but just she was great at doing stuff too, and stuff. Yeah. In my role afterwards, where I was owning my own business and working in PR, she was always super receptive and also clever. And that's a loss in the media world, I think, for not having her on the air.
Wait a minute, she was smart, attractive, and clever and funny. What kind of a perfect media person? No wonder she's not on the air anymore, Bob. Like, there's no room for a person like that in our media today.
There's no room for wit and clever.
All right, I want to find out about Stellick Marketing Communications before we say goodbye, because you've been you created that back in in the year 2000.
22. Yeah, I mean
Mike, get faster to the but. But quick note about the great Matt Sundin, right? That what a trade that was, right? Our own beloved Wendell Clark traded to the Nordique, and you got Matt Sundin coming over. A lot of other people in that trade, but who cares about them? This is about Matt Sundin. He arrives wearing his Jofa helmet, okay? Did you play a role in Matt's changing his helmet so he'd look like maybe he's belongs?
Yeah, I did suggest to Matt that a Jofa, that if he went into a CCM, he might be more beloved by the Leaf fans.
Yeah, Wendell wore CCM.
Yeah, even though I mean, Borja wore the $2 Jofa that
Wendell. What did Gretzky wear?
That Gretzky, same helmet.
Yeah,
but my fear again, after I remember when Matt's changed to a CCM helmet, my fear was he'd get a concussion and then get mad going, the Jofa helmet's way better because it was a bit more kazooie. It wasn't quite the Stan Mikita size, but it was bigger, and it really hadn't caught on. And I don't think he was getting paid to use it either. So if he was getting paid, I wouldn't have told him.
It was the Swedish influence.
It was this. He also had a yellow Volvo for a while that the guys called the Banana Mobile, and he got rid of that. Like, he had to deal with a Volvo dealership. I think he felt he was being cliched and typecast as a Swede.
Well, he used to have IKEA furniture when he first came to Leafs, right?
He lived quite modestly in 999 Bay Street or whatever. Like, Matt's is a tremendously humble, decent human being, and a great trade by Cliff, and terrible to lose Wendell. And the only trade I ever argued with Cliff about, because that was not my job, was when he brought Wendell back. Because I just said to him, because he was going, this is when we were getting desperate again, and he said, my elevator guy's telling me to bring Wendell back. The doorman, I'm going, if you're listening to the elevator and the doorman, you don't need
I think he did. Didn't Wendell do 3 tours of duty, right? Because he came back for that Ottawa Senators playoff. He had that goal in the playoffs against.
And again, it's the recreating the marriage 3 times, and Cliff's.
You can't go home again.
You can't go home again, even though Wendell. Wendell could pull it off, and Dougie. Right. Poor Dougie.
He had 4 minutes and 51 seconds.
Is that what it was?
It was 4:51 of ice time because I was so excited he was back. And his first shift, or whatever, not first shift, I guess, but he had 4 minutes and 51 seconds of ice time, and that was it.
Yeah, and that was it. Yeah,
that's the worst luck of all. The one guy though I will compare to Wendell in that we all loved it when he came back was Tony Fernandez. I think Tony Fernandez had 4 tours of duty with the Toronto Blue Jays.
Yeah,
just off the top of my head. There anyway. Yeah. All right, my friend. Okay, tell me about Stellick Marketing Communications Inc.
Yeah, so when I left after the Leafs in '97, I worked for a big agency for a couple of years, and they didn't really do sports and grassroots that well. That was a big PR agency, so I just started out on my own. I was doing a contract job there for NFL Canada, and the guy was saying, well, at the NFL in New York said, we're looking at getting a full-time an agency partner in Canada. And I said, well, by the way, I'm just thinking about going out on my own. Would you hire me? So I was lucky at the very beginning. I was able to go out as a one-man band with NFL Canada was a client. I had Labatt as a client. I had McDonald's as a client. I ended up getting Skydome as a client when they were owned by one of their myriad of owners. And
wow.
So I was cash flow positive from the get go, and so that's sort of led to 20 some odd years of working with trying to help companies do impactful community programming, marketing programming that's taking the smell out of the jock a bit, right? And doing that. So it's been a really good run and a lot of fun. I mean, it's different. I do miss parts of being with the team, the team meals, traveling with the guys on the road. But again, we were traveling in commercial flights for longer flights back then. We were traveling on a Convair 580 turboprop. It was a different era, and to me, the era of the players started to change really when guys started living in Rosedale, when you got guys that were starting to move into Rosedale, and you went, oh boy, this is a different era for hockey, and times are changing. Larry Murphy was the first one to move to Rosedale, who is the most humble, decent guy. I think his wife was dying to live in Rosedale.
And also a great example of a player the fan base did not embrace.
The Leaf fans are sophisticated but wrong so often.
We like Motor City Smitty, but don't give us this Hall of Famer Larry Murphy.
Yeah. So Larry, every time I see Gene Principe when he's on the air, I always think of the skewering I set Larry Murphy up for, because Larry Murphy played really well that year. He was at the All-Star game. Yeah. And Kenny Johnson was his defense partner. Right. And Kenny Johnson was a young stay-at-home, covered Larry's butt all the time. And then Kenny Johnson suffered a severe injury. I think it was in Long Island, after All-Star, or right around All-Star anyway. And Larry Murphy, I think, was a plus player up to that point. Your SVP sales is going to correct all these my mistakes.
VP of sales?
Yeah. I just promoted SVP, but
well, he's got to sell something first, okay, Bob? And then he gets the promotion.
Okay, sorry.
Okay? Let him sell something first.
Again, more Simon, but he struggled after that because he had no one backing him up, and so I remember Larry coming to me and grabbing my shoulder on the bus, because we were going to Buffalo, because I was holding the bus so he could do a interview with our rights holder, which was Global, and he grabs my arm and he goes, "Thanks for that, Bob." And I went, "Well, what's bad?" And then I remember watching the broadcast, the interview. It was a tape thing. He was in a suit. And Gene Principe says to him, "Are the Leaf fans booing your pay or your play?" Like, how do you answer that? And because he was making $2 million a year, and astronomical sum. And again, can you imagine that in a broadcast today, like the Homer broadcast that we have now? No,
I can't imagine it today.
And that was and I set him up for that. Like I set him up for that one-on-one. And Larry went on to have a Hall of Fame career, and I see him every year at the Hall of Fame induction. He comes in most years.
Yeah, he won bunch of cups after that.
Yeah, and great guy.
With the Detroit Red Wings there. Yeah, one of those weird examples where we just he was a whipping boy.
Yeah,
but undeservedly so.
Yeah, Leaf fans admire effort, and they don't admire some other things. And Larry gave effort, but he just had that. There was just something funny. Like he was victimized for some bad goals, and it suddenly became pay. Very
interesting times, Bob. Honestly, we've left enough on the table, I think, for a sequel. But anything that we didn't talk about in this conversation that you were on your drive here or whatever, you're like, oh, I hope I get to tell this story. Like, this is the time.
No, yeah, that's right.
Now's the time,
I'd like to now
Bob.
reveal all on Gord Stellick. No, I think, I appreciate the invitation. I appreciate being in the top 1,500. And
you just made it in.
Voted by
this close
fans.
to missing that out. By the way, you and Gord still tight? What's the relationship like with brothers there?
Absolutely.
How often do you see Gord?
I see Gord, I talk to him every other day, and I see him maybe once a week or whatever.
So Gord never once mentioned, hey, if you ever get invited to Toronto Mike, you'll get some delicious palma pasta.
No,
he never mentioned. He's been scoring lasagnas off me for years.
Gord just mentioned what a good guy you were. That was it.
And I got that. Okay.
Yes, and I didn't realize your first name wasn't Toronto.
Tell your brother, I don't know if there's an Easter dinner or something, tell him I got to get him and Damien back in the basement Tuesday. The listenership loves when Gord and Damien are together. They just complement each other perfectly. And
like
the
water
only time
and
they
oil,
get together really to be broadcast is in my basement, so I got to keep doing that.
They got to sell that book they've got, right?
Well, they have that new deal,
Revival,
right?
yeah.
Where you, it's like commission basis or whatever it is.
That's right. Finance your own bookstore.
Do you have a book in you, Bob? You ever thought of writing a book?
Well, George Armstrong used to joke he could write a book, but he had to wait for his wife to die first. But that's
Right. For the real talk
that's
to come
exactly.
out. All right, Bob, thanks so much, man. I loved this very much. This was
Thank
fantastic.
you very much for inviting me.
And that brings us to the end of our 1,440th show. You can follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky. I'm at Toronto Mike. Now, Bob Stellick on the app formerly known as Twitter is B Stellick. But you can go to is it right? Stellick.ca?
Yes, this is .com.
Okay, let me get that right. I'll fix that in post. Stellick.com is where you go for all your Bob Stellick needs. It's all satisfied at Stellick.com. Go there.
Or the Witness Protection Program.
Much love to all who made this possible. That's Great Lakes Brewery. Don't forget your fresh craft beer. Palma Pasta. I'll get your lasagna for you. RecycleMyElectronics.ca. Raymond James Canada. And, of course, Ridley Funeral Home. See you all tomorrow when Jay Douglas returns to the program. Looking forward to that. See you then.